I completely agree with the previous speakers, but now I want to take a slightly other perspective, the perspective of the users who might be affected from digital violence, as we name it, and also, who might witness digital violence and want to take action on it. And I would like to take a more practical view now of users who want to defend themselves or just take action on this illegal content that they might experience. And let's have a look at what the Digital Services Act addresses of these concerns and which are so far left behind in the proposal. So I just prepared some questions. When we ask ourselves if the internet will be a more safe space in the future because of the Digital Services Act, then from our experience as a consultation center for people affected from digital violence, at least these questions need to be addressed. So the first thing is, how can I get in touch with social media platforms? The second is, what can I do if they do not answer or if they only reply by using text blocks? Many people report that they don't feel heard, they feel ignored, they feel just left alone by social media platforms. If they try to take action on illegal content that is either directed against them, or if they just want to show civil courage and take action against illegal content that is not directly directed against them. The next question is, do I have rights if my content is removed? Or do I have rights if the content is unlawfully not removed? Those are very, very important questions that we have to ask ourselves. The last question is, can I enforce my rights and how much does it cost? This is also very, very important for people using social media platforms that are confronted with illegal content. These questions need to be addressed. This is the absolute minimum from our experience that we have with working with the victims directly, that are often complaining about the arbitrariness and also about the unresponsiveness of social media platforms. And as I understand it, the Digital Services Act is also supposed to address these questions because, it's called the platform constitution, and this is the least I would expect. So right now we have the situation that we can do a lot to protect the victims, we can help them, we can consult them, we can even give them litigation financing, which is what we also do. We can try to take their hand and guide them through the process, but we still see that there are limits, and these limits are imposed by the social media platforms, by private online platforms that dictate the rules of our public debate. And at some point in time, we decided to put our public debate into the hands of these private platforms. And they are also this way dictating the rules of freedom of expression. We heard that already a lot, so I will not elaborate on this. We are convinced that the Digital Services Act can change the situation that we find now. We can change that the people feel left alone, that they feel that all decisions, especially the content decisions by social media platforms, are so arbitrary. We think that it can be a unique opportunity to create equality of arms between users and platforms. I know that this will not change many other aspects that the previous speakers also addressed, but this is the least minimum that I would expect from a legislation like the Digital Services Act is supposed to be. So with a closer look now to the Commission's proposal, we also already heard that in parts, we see that there is a strong focus on oversight and compliance. And it's also important that this is addressed finally after so many years. And we also have a focus on transparency. I think that some of these transparency regulations are also well done and something that civil society also asked for a long time already. But we also have a fear of overblocking and a fear to protect the rights of uploaders, to protect them from potential removal of illegal content that might not turn out to be very illegal in the end. So the most important question for me is what is missing. Missing, and unfortunately completely missing, is rights for users that report illegal content. Users that want to defend themselves against digital violence that they experience, but also for users that only want to report illegal content because they just think that it's not very good that this is still online and everybody can see it. And as we also know, there's still a liability regime that is very much in favor of the platforms. And we also know that there is this trusted flagger mechanism, and that obviously the Commission is taking a lot of hope into civil society to report the illegal content, as nobody else is liable to do it. And I especially miss some rights for users that unsuccessfully report digital violence to the platforms that is directed against them and that is ignored by the platforms, because we see also under NETTZ that is already in effect since 2017, and I'm also very much in favor in looking at the learnings and seeing what the NETTZ has brought, what was good, what was bad, because it is somehow a blueprint for the Digital Services Act that we want to create right now, and that will just apply these rules on a bigger scale. And this is what I also do not understand, why this part is missing. And because I'm very much a fan of looking at solutions rather than complaining about what's bad, I would just dive directly into the room for improvement, the possibilities that we have, that we still have, because it's only a proposal, of course, to change this situation that we find. So the first aspect I would like to address is the aspect of content moderation. I know the notice and action, although you cannot really call it an action procedure that we have right now, the notice procedure for illegal content is not perfect. But if we have it, then there must be at least minimum of protection for users that suffer from digital violence and want to report digital violence that they experience. The first one is that we so far have no access to the redress mechanisms for people who report potentially illegal content to the platforms. It's something that I really do not understand. Only the uploaders, so the potential perpetrators from my point of view, are the ones who have access to these redress mechanisms in both stages, to the platform and also to the out-of-court settlement body that is also supposed to be installed. Then we also need to ask for clear rules for the online platforms, because we also see from the experience with the Network Enforcement Act that we already have since 2017, that everywhere there's room for interpretation, the platforms will bend it to the very limit, to their advantage, and that everywhere where they can, they will try to evade the rules. That's why we have to make clear that we do not work too much with wording that leaves too much room for interpretation when we can avoid it. And I think in these aspects, we can avoid it easily. The first one is that I would like to see a statement of reasons for all content decisions, also for the content decisions that reject notifications, because otherwise we don't enable the users to assess if their prospects for legal action are good or if they are not good. And this is something that we should at least give users the chance to really realistically think about taking legal action. The second point is that I would like to ask for a deadline of 7 days for the assessment. So far, we have no real deadline in the proposal, which is also something that I do not understand, because from our experience with NETTZ, without undue delay and how the wording is right now, this can mean anything, and the platforms will invent some explanation while everything was so complicated to assess and that it just took weeks to think about it. And this is something that cannot work on a larger scale. Then we also see difficulties in the notification mechanisms. We learned also from NETTZ that they have to be described very precisely in order to make them user-friendly and easy to access. The next thing I would like to ask for is to create an obligation to delete illegal content. I know that many people already claim that the liability regime is also already putting incentives for overblocking. This is also something where it's worth to look at the NETTZ. From the evaluation of NETTZ, we have absolutely no indication that overblocking is taking place. The opposite is the fact, but there's no proof that underblocking is really happening. So we just can say that the fact that only 14% of the notification leads to removal of illegal content is a hint that overblocking might be not that much of a problem, although it's very important to address this. I completely see this. And still with the liability regime, which is very, very theoretical, because if there's a liability but nobody can enforce it, which is the situation that we have right now, because without an obligation to delete illegal content, it cannot be treated as an infringement of the DSA. And also the Digital Service Coordinator, which is the authority in charge, cannot take action if this is violated on a structural level. And it can also not be subject to complaints from users that want to complain about what platforms are doing with their notifications. This is something where I really see a very strong, very strong difficulties in the proposal, because I think that as it is designed right now, there's even an incentive to just reject notifications that are not 100% illegal at the very first glance. And that's also something what we see, that the platforms really rely on the fact that users will not take legal action because nobody is crazy enough to spend all the money on suing Facebook or Twitter or whoever. One more point that I'm always concerned about, because we have serious issues with this in all over Europe, and this is access to justice. We need to give users the chance to access courts, to access rule of law, in fact, because if we don't do this, then we cannot just tell them the platforms are not the experts, they cannot decide what is illegal or not if we do not offer other solutions for them. That's why we, again, have to make the platforms accessible and create a point of contact in every member state that can be reached in at least one of the official languages of this member state. So people do not have to search the input for some address in Ireland or somewhere else abroad and then think about how to take care of legally secure delivery of documents there. This is just something that users cannot do and that users cannot be held responsible for. The second thing, the Digital Services Act proposal so far thinks that there is a need for an out-of-court settlement body. On the one hand, we say that the platforms as private entities are not entitled to have decisions about what is illegal, what is not illegal. But on the other hand, we create this external body, which is also a private entity and not an authority, as at least the way I understand it. And I have serious doubts how we can ensure the independence of this body, how we can make sure that the platforms are not trying to buy in themselves. How can we make sure that the costs are much lower than when people want to go to court, because otherwise people won't use it, just as they don't use the courts because of the crazy cost risk they have to accept. And then I'm also asking myself, why don't we make the courts more accessible instead and stick to rule of law and enable the courts to decide on what is illegal and what is not illegal? Because in my opinion, we don't need this parallel structure. We can just see how in other fields we make the courts accessible, especially when we look to intellectual property rights, for example. Then there are many advantages and it's much easier to go to court. That's why we are also asking for adding summary proceedings to enable litigation in the first place. I'm completely aware that this is not solving the cost risk problem, but it's the first step into the right direction, because right now decisions take up to 1 year or even longer if you have to go into a second round. And this is something that also is deterring people from taking legal action at all. And one thing that is also needs to be addressed is the clarification of jurisdictions. This is something that is also very complicated, because there are few exemptions from the country of origin principle, but in many parts, we have to assume that still the Irish standard, when we look at the bigger social media platforms or wherever the country of origin is, needs to be applied, and only in very few exemptions the jurisdiction of the member state where the user lives can be applied. And lastly, and very quickly, I would like to make you aware of another problem, which is that we still have other very harmful services within the EU, and that I really doubt from the current state of the proposal that only by stating that they should provide a legal representative, this will not make sure that the Digital Services Act can be enforced on those services because I'm just afraid they are not willing to, and if they do not comply with these rules, and with the example of Telegram, they are located in Dubai, for example, and do not answer any letter, they will not voluntarily provide a legal representative, then I'm not sure how to enforce the Digital Services Act on them, because there is no opportunity provided that creates access to third-party services or just something else that gets us hold of these services within the EU when they are registered abroad and have no assets in any member state. Yeah, thank you. That's it from me, and I'm happy to take any question.